we're going to get started, but I just want to get a quick response from you guys. What is the limit of age to call someone a child? What is an acceptable age limit to call someone a child? 14. Any contenders to that age? 23. Okay. Any other contenders? 22. People don't grow up. Infinite. 12 years. Okay. No age. Oh. This is good because it's good to know which age groups I'm going to be offending today. Okay? So anybody above 22, 25, whoever falls in the not child category, I'm sorry guys. Actually, it's not me. It's Paul. So you can blame it on him. But yeah, I'd like us to turn to Hebrews 5. And we'll read from 13 and 14, and then we'll go to Hebrews 6 and read the first 3 verses. For someone who lives on milk is still an infant and doesn't know how to do what is right. Solid food is for those who are mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. So let us stop going over the basic teachings about Christ again and again. Let us go on instead and become mature in our understanding. Surely we don't need to start again with the fundamental importance of repenting from evil deeds, placing our faith in God. You don't need further instruction about baptisms, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment. And so, God willing, we will move forward to further understanding. Can I ask you to repeat the last 2 words with me? Further understanding. All right? Paul is basically calling all Christians children. And not like child of God, like you're such a child. Okay, so he's not being like, oh, you're a child. He's like, you're such a child. That is Paul's tone here. And the reason he's doing that, because he's inviting us to go forward, to move forward to further understand. Randy was saying, like, soaring up, right? To move forward to further understanding. Now, over the last few weeks, we as a community have been going through a formational journey of being a disciple, an apprentice of God. And we've been talking about what it means to know God, and to draw close to Him and grow in our knowledge and understanding of God. And Paul here refers to 3 pairs of teachings that are fundamental and elementary to this process. They're like milk. They are essential for the nourishment of a Christ follower. All right? The first pair is repentance and faith. The second pair is baptism and laying on of hands. The third pair is resurrection of the dead and eternal judgment. Now, if you have any questions related to this, you can ask Alan. All right? He's right here. But just for the purpose of this conversation, it's good to know that without these fundamentals, the disciple of Christ is malnourished. All right? If you feel like you want to move forward in Christ, but you don't have these fundamentals, there's no point. It's like when you go to the gym and they're like, hey, first you need to go to the doctor. It's that essential. That's the essential layer of nourishment and nutrition you need to move on to solid food. But then Paul identifies what is solid food. And it's quite crazy because he says, he mentions the teaching on righteousness being one of the solid foods that we consume. And then he gives us a marker. So you know how when you go and meet these gym bros, and they'll look at you and the first thing they'll be like, you're not having enough protein. Somehow they just know. Because it's a marker, they just know you're not having enough protein. And that's what Paul is like. He says a marker of spiritual maturity is that you're going to be able to discern what is right and discern what is wrong. All right? So that is what solid food is. It's righteousness and teachings on righteousness marked by the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. So what is righteousness? Yeah. According to Lexham Bible Dictionary, they gave this really simple starting statement. They said, righteousness is the quality, repeat after me please, quality, state, and characteristic. Quality, state, and characteristic of being in the right. All right? Well, what does that mean? Like we sort of have an understanding of what righteousness is. It's a heavy word, right? It's like one of those big words that fall under this category of terminology we use, which is very exclusive to Christian circles. But here, the dictionary goes on to explain. He says, they say, the English word righteousness refers to the quality of being righteous or in the right, and is cognate to justness, and justice. Okay, this is the explanation they gave, and I'm not going to pretend like I understood it fully. Okay, because it goes on to say, in biblical usage, righteousness possesses ethical, forensic, salvific, and socio-religious connotations. You guys know all those terms? I think I know like one out of those. Forensic? Depending on the context. Generally speaking, in relation to God, righteousness can refer to a divine attribute or to a divine activity, while in relation to human subjects, righteousness primarily denotes a legal and social standing or a moral state. Now, you guys, I'm not expecting you to leave this room with this definition in your mouth, because this is a handful. It's not gonna happen. I don't think I fully get it either. But what we gather is these two things. For God, righteousness is who He is and what He does. Everything He is right. Everything He does is right. For God, that's righteousness. For us humans, righteousness is a status that is given to us, like the blue tick. It's not that everyone is righteous, it's the status that is given to someone if they fit a set of criteria, like a job description. If a person has fit all those categories, they are considered righteous. And who is considering them righteous? Other humans? No, God is considering them righteous because He's deciding that this is my criteria, these people fit the bill, literally, so they are considered righteous. But if they do not meet that set of criteria, they are considered unrighteous, right? The Bible is very, very absolute about this. There's no gray area. There's no, a person is not probably right, or they could have been right, or they may have been right. A person is right or wrong. That's it. That's all we have. We only have those two choices. You have to score 100% to pass, because if you don't, even if you score 99.999999999, you still don't pass. Imagine if our education system was like that. Sometimes it is. But But that's the truth. Like if you, in God's measurements, if you only get 100%, you pass. If you get anything less than 100%, even like a fraction, quantum less, you don't qualify. And what is Paul saying in Hebrews 5? He's saying that what we need to do is be able to discern and train ourselves with the skill to know the difference between this absolute right and absolute wrong. And I'll give you an example of what that sounds like to me, okay? Now, a while back, we went to a tea estate. And this guy, he took us to this tea tasting room. It was beautiful. And he had like 10 different types of teas prepared in cups. And he was explaining, okay, this is made with leaves that are crushed and told. And this is made with orthodox leaves. And this is made with... And then he asked us to taste all of them. And I'm telling you, it just tasted like tea. It was not different. Every single cup tasted just like tea. But he said and he explained, see, the person who is able to differentiate, because there is a distinction in the taste. The people who are able to differentiate between the taste and not just like there is a right and wrong way to do that. And who's able to do that, they actually get paid crazy. So in case you're looking for a job and you've got a really sensitive tongue, you should go to Assam. But when he told me, I was just thinking about it, because here, what Paul is asking and giving us is a job that has a far higher standard. All right? And he's calling us to a tougher job. And that he's saying, it's not the job of one or two people. He's saying that is the job of every believer in Christ, to be mature and grow and to discern. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at two people. We're going to learn from our Master, our God, and we'll see what he qualifies as right and what he qualifies as wrong. And then we'll explore that through the lives of two people when they sort of came across the same kind of test, how they responded to it. And that is, those two subjects are Ahaz and Hezekiah. Does anyone know who they are? I know some people who know. Okay. Ahaz and Hezekiah are kings of Judah. Now, I know there are going to be some scholars in the room who are well aware of this. You can tune out for a minute because we're going to do a quick recap of who these two people are, so we're all on the same page, okay? So if you can just show the map. You guys know Saul, right? No, a little back behind me, just one sec, yeah. So we know Saul. He was the first king of Israel, of all the 12 tribes. And then we know that Saul's mantle of kingship was taken by David. God anointed David. David married one of the daughters, Michal of Saul. And then David had a son called Solomon, who also reigned over all 12 tribes of Israel. But then after Solomon finished his reign, all right, the kingdom of Israel, the 12 tribes, they split into two major parts, all right? The first part, the first was the people who remained from the tribe of the royal line, which was the tribe of Judah. They called themselves the kingdom of Judah. They had Jerusalem as the capital. And then there was the northern kingdom of Israel. A total of 12, right? A total of 10 tribes went to the north, moved and said, hey, we are part of this. The only other tribes other than Judah who decided to stick around was the tribe of Levi, because they were priests and they were spread. They didn't actually have any land. So they decided to be in the kingdom. And more kings of Judah usually instituted the practices of worshiping one true God, while the other kingdoms became more syncretic. So they went more and more to the kingdom of Judah. And the only other one was Benjamin, because Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. Now, why am I telling you this? Good question. You can ask me later. But we go to the next bit, okay? This is what it looked like when Saul David and Solomon reigned. You see, all this large land was under the promise of God. And then, after Solomon, the top part had all the 10 tribes, and then this small part had the tribe of Judah. Now, it's important. Why? Because if you see, it's surrounded by people who are not very friendly. Because these people used to stay here. And then Israel went in, drove all of them out, and declared that land, right? So the tribe and the people of Israel were always at war with the people around. So yeah, this is the topography of our two kings. Who are the two kings we're talking about? Yes. Some top scorers. Awesome. Very sufficing. Okay. So now that our land and topography is done, let's talk about the two people. All right. So this is the stats of these two people. Ahaz was the 12th king of Judah. All right? So after the split happened, he was 12 generations later. And Hezekiah was the 13th king of Judah. That guy was crowned when he was 20 years, this at 29. He reigned for 16, he reigned for 25, and he reigned for 29 years. But this is the key difference. God deemed Ahaz wrong, but God deemed Hezekiah to be right in his eyes, because he was doing what is right. So we're going to explore what they're doing. We won't go into a lot of detail, but there's one common thing that these both kings faced, and that was the threat to their capital city, the throne room, the palace of Jerusalem. Both these kings faced a threat to the city of Jerusalem. All right? Now, let's take a look at what was Ahaz's situation when that threat happened, okay? If you take that diagram in, if this is the threat, before the threat, what Ahaz was doing was he was worshipping idols, he was offering unholy sacrifices and following detestable practices. Where do we read that? Let's go to 2 Chronicles 28, right? Here it says, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. He did not do what was pleasing in the sight of the Lord, as his ancestor David had done. Instead, he followed the example of the kings of Israel. He cast metal images for the worship of Baal. He offered sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom, even sacrificing his own sons in the fire. In this way, he followed the detestable practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of the Israelites. Because of all this, the Lord his God allowed the king of Aram to defeat Ahaz and to exile a large number of people to Damascus. So this is the history. So we see this threat that is there to Jerusalem, but there is a pretext to this threat. And that pretext is the actions of this king. Because of his actions of worshipping idols, of what were the other things? Of offering unholy sacrifices, of following detestable practices. All of them led him to a place to face a threat to his capital city. But then there's something that he did after he received the threat. His response to the threat, immediately when he came to know that, oh my gosh, Jerusalem is going under siege, what he did was he asked Assyria for help. So if you can look at the map again, those two maps, if you can look at this map, this is great. All of these are a threat to Jerusalem. So what this guy does, King Ahaz, he decides, I'm going to use premier military tactics. He says, I'll go to the person right on top, Assyrian Empire, and sandwich my enemies. That's his military strategy. Because Assyria was at that time quite strong and powerful. So he's like, I'm going to go ask the kings of Assyria to come to my aid, defeat these guys, and my kingdom will be established. That was his solution to the threat that he received. And then what he did, what happened after that, is when he went to the king of Assyria at that time, the king said, yeah, okay, cool. He came, he defeated those two armies, but then he also came and defeated his cities. And he said, Acha, now you need to pledge allegiance to me. So this guy said, oh, I'm your servant, I'm your vassal, I will pay you tribute. So what he did to pay tribute to this king of Assyria, because if he didn't, he would basically lose his kingship. So what he would do is he would go to the temple. Remember his ancestor Solomon, he built the most magnificent temple of its time. Everything inside the temple had gold. He began to take the gold away from that. The pure and sacred things he began to take away and make this payment to the king of Assyria. Another thing he did, it's kind of crazy. In the temple of Solomon, before the temple, there was an altar on which they sacrificed, right, to the Lord of hosts. What he did is he got another altar made. He moved this from its place. He got another altar made to the gods of Damascus, the gods who defeated him in other wars, right? He made an altar to that god. And he said, from here onwards, you make sacrifices here, but I will keep the Lord's altar and I will use it for guidance. I know this sounds like it's 3,000 millennia ago talk, but I want you to start thinking of how this is relevant to us today. Right? There is something that his actions reveal to us. And that's my first statement for you. If you're taking notes, the first statement is this: our actions reveal what we hope for. By doing what he was doing, Ahaz was hoping that he would appease either the king of Assyria or the gods of Assyria. And this was so that he was hoping to keep his kingdom as is. That was the hope of Ahaz. All right? So his actions revealed what he was hoping for. But why was he doing this? What was the reason behind all of these things that he did? Okay? Now, Isaiah the prophet, Isaiah was the prophet around this time. He gives us an insight. In Isaiah 7:2, we read, the news had come to the royal court of Judah when the two kings allied together. Syria is allied with Israel against us. When he faced the threat, it says, so the hearts of the king and his people trembled with fear like trees shaking in the storm. Beneath Ahaz's action of all that he was doing, there was a layer of motivation. What Ahaz was driven by was fear and insecurity. All right? And 2 Chronicles 22, 23 show us the way he was thinking. All right? This is his line of thought. Now remember, this is a 20-year-old guy. What were you doing when you were 20? Or are? 20-year-old guy. And this is his way of thinking. He, Ahaz, offered sacrifices to the gods of Damascus who had defeated him, for he said, since these gods helped the kings of Aram, they will help me too, if I sacrifice to them. But instead, it says, they led to his ruin and the ruin of all Judah. And that brings us to our second statement. Our motivations reveal what we believe. What is the first one? Our actions reveal what we hope for. And our motivations reveal what we believe. So why does it matter to us today? See, because what motivated Ahaz then, fear and insecurity, can motivate us today. We may not have Jerusalem and may not have a throne, but we can still face fear and face insecurity. Our enemies look different. They don't look like armies, but they are still enemies. See, this guy is a descendant of David. You guys remember the amazing life that David led? And at the end of David's life, God gave him a promise, the Davidic promise. And God told him that I will establish your throne forever. God told him, your offspring will rise up and sit on this throne. And so he's grown up hearing this promise. He has a promise that he's grown up with. But before his eyes, this promise is slipping away. The kingdom that David had is broken, and then his cities are lost, and now his capital, his throne, the only thing he has to call himself king, that's going to be taken away. All the promises and goodness that he was promised seem to be taken away by those more powerful. So in his head, he's thinking, I lost because my God is powerless. I lost because the God of my ancestors who gave me this throne does not have the power to sustain it. So you see, beneath the layer of motivation, there's a deeper layer, and that is the layer of belief. And that belief for Ahaz is that God is not sovereign. All right? He believed that his defeat equals his God's defeat. So he is not losing the battle. God is losing the battle. Okay? Clearly, God is not that powerful a God. But he is a winner. Ahaz thinks of himself as a winner. He's like, I'm going to win. So whatever I will do for the sake. In his mind, he's right. Because he has a kingdom to protect. He has a throne to protect. He has a bloodline to protect. So he's thinking, okay, I have to do all these things. I have to think strategy. I have to do all of these, actions to protect what I have. So in his head, he's right. So he's like, okay, if God is not working, I'm going to look at other options. What are the other people who I can get help from? And that's often the way we look at a life when a trial comes our way. Right? Now, Ahaz was driven by one purpose, and that is fear. His fear blinded him to what is right and what is wrong. The instructions to him were clear. It's not like he didn't know. It's not a knowledge gap. He knew what was right. Every male child in the Jewish custom grew up hearing the law of Moses. He knows the 10 commandments. He was supposed to, as the king, he was supposed to keep them in front of his eyes at all times. And what is the first one? What is the first commandment? Exactly. And then the second, you shall have no other gods. But this guy, he is like, okay, he knows. Then he's like, maybe it was relevant to that generation, but it's not relevant to our generation. Maybe times have changed, so the laws will change. See, Ahaz was not able to differentiate between right and wrong, between good and evil, because he thought he could choose what is good and what is evil. And you see, there's a nuanced difference between choosing what is good and evil and choosing between good and evil. Often, we like to do the former. We like to choose what is good and what this is good for me, this is bad for me. This is right for me, this is wrong for me. But we are not called to do that. Remember what we talked about righteousness? There's only one person who's right, and that's God. And he gets to decide what is good and what is evil. We don't get to decide what is good and evil, but we get to decide between good and evil. And that choice has been given to us over and over and over. You can think of so many people who came across that choice. Right? Choose right over wrong. Choose good over evil. Choose life over death. You don't get to decide what life is and what death is. You only get to choose between life and death. Right? His fear drove him to desperation, but it was his pride that sealed his fate. He failed to recognize the sovereignty and absolute righteousness of God. That what God deemed as right and wrong was in fact right and wrong. In James 2, we read from 10 to 13, I'm going to read. For the person who keeps all of the laws except one is as guilty as a person who has broken all of God's laws. For the same God who said, you must not commit adultery, also said, you must not murder. So if you murder someone but do not commit adultery, you have still broken the law. So whatever you do or whatever you say or whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you've been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. And then he goes on to say in 14, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith? See, this guy had faith. He kept the altar, remember, in the temple. He kept the altar to God. He said, I'll keep it for guidance. He kept Isaiah. He kept all of these things. He's like, okay, yeah, God is good. He's a part of my life. You know, you meet folks who are like, yeah, spirituality is a part of who I am. You know, it's a part of their identity. It says here, what good is it if you say you have faith, but you don't show it by your action? What good is it if Ahaz said, I believe in God, but his actions showed that he went and paid tribute to Assyria? What good is it? All right? Let's move a little bit forward and remind ourselves of the definition of righteousness that we had heard before. Righteousness is the quality, state, and characteristic of being in the right. Was Ahaz in the right? No. Come on, guys, he was not. Trying to say it's an easy answer. Was Ahaz in the right? No. Yes, that's. You are right. Awesome. Okay, but the quality, state, and characteristic of being in the right is not relative. It is absolute, and it is decided by God. And you know who realized this very well? It was his son, Ahaz's son. Hezekiah was the son and the 13th king of Judah, the son of Ahaz. So he saw his father do all of these things. He saw his father shaking with fear when those two kings came against. He saw his father go to Assyria. You know, he saw his father mourn the loss of his brother because the father lost not only his sons to sacrifices, but also in the war. So just to give you perspective, the threat that that Ahaz faced was one of the two kings, remember, that caused a problem for them? It is said that Pekah, the king, he killed 120,000 men of valor in one day. One day. That is the loss. So you can imagine why he was shaking with fear. Because if they came, there's just 3 people, yeah? 3 people in the sense, 3 tribes, right? And then you already have the 10 tribes, and then you have the king of Damascus coming. So you can imagine why he was shaking with fear. It's a valid thing to be scared at this point. And Hezekiah saw all of that. He saw the fear that was rampant in the land. I imagine he must have seen all of this happen. And by all means, Hezekiah could have followed in Ahaz's footsteps. But let's see 2 Kings 18. It says, Hezekiah, he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestor David had done. He removed the pagan shrines, smashed the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke up the bronze serpent that Moses had made because the people of Israel had been offering sacrifices to it. See, remember the bronze serpent was a good thing? It was something that God had asked him to do. He had said, you guys are falling sick because a snake's biting you. Take a snake, put it on a pole, put it up. Everyone who looks on it will be healed. But what they did is instead of worshipping the God who asked Moses to do it, they worshipped the pole. And so knowing that this was given by God to do, this guy, he went and he broke down those poles with the snakes on them. And so we see this comparison for Hezekiah before the threat and after the threat. All right, before the threat, what Hezekiah fervently was doing was he was removing the idols. As soon as he became king, he had a to-do list. How can I do everything that my dad was not doing? Like, okay, first I will go remove all the idols. First I will trust in the Lord. Then I will rebel against the king of Assyria. Remember, he had his dad had put a treaty and he had become a vassal. He said to the king of Assyria, I will no longer serve as a vassal to you. And to get out of that debt, he emptied the temple of gold and said, here is your payment, but I will no longer be a vassal to you. And that's what Hezekiah did. He got out of the huge debt that he had been put on. And what Hezekiah did was he followed the commandments. This is all he's doing before he's faced with the threat to Jerusalem. But did that stop the threat to Jerusalem? No. He still faced a major threat to his capital city, to his throne room. But this threat was much different. And I want to explain the magnitude of this threat, okay? Now, for us, we saw what Ahaz was fighting against, right? I want to show you what Hezekiah was fighting against. Remember all that part which was once kingdom of Israel? See, the kingdom of Israel fell to the king of Assyria. And what this little kingdom faced was this giant. It was this huge giant that it faced. We saw it as, somewhere up there. But this is the threat that poor Hezekiah was facing. And it's quite crazy the way the king of Assyria threatened Hezekiah and his people. You know what they would do? He would send his commander to read out a letter of threatening Jerusalem at the walls of Jerusalem. And this commander, Assyrian commander, would stand and he would speak blasphemy. He would tell, how can you guys trust Hezekiah? How can you trust his God? Don't you know what Assyria has done? Don't you remember what has happened to the kings of Israel? Because Assyria, and they would speak. And this guy, Hezekiah's men, they would plead with the commander, speak in a language that the locals don't understand. Because we can speak in your language. But they said, no, we want the locals to understand. We want to incite fear. And he would do that. So that the people of Judah would rebel against Hezekiah. But what Hezekiah did next will reveal those three things: action, motivation, and belief. Let's read from 2 Kings 19:14 to 19. When Hezekiah got the letter that threatened the siege of Jerusalem. After Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it, he went up to the Lord's temple and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed this prayer before the Lord, O Lord God of Israel, you are enthroned between the mighty cherubim. You alone are God of all the heavens, all the kingdoms of the earth. You alone created the heavens and the earth. Bend down, O Lord, and listen. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to Sennacherib's words of defiance against the living God. Do you remember who else sounded like this? Exactly. David sounded like this. Because he's like, who is this who comes and blasphemes the name of the living God? And that's what Hezekiah is doing. He's bringing that letter. He's telling God, who is this? Who is this man who comes and claims authority over you, over your land? So he's complaining to God. He's saying, it is true, Lord, that the kings of Assyria have destroyed all these nations, and they have thrown the gods of these nations into the fire and burned them. But of course, the Assyrians could destroy them. They were not gods at all. Only idols of wood and stone shaped by human hands. Now, O Lord our God, rescue us from his power. Then all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you alone, O Lord, are God. What does this action reveal about the motivation of Hezekiah? Faith. He has faith. And then what does it reveal about the belief? He believes that God is the one true God, the sovereign over all. So he's not shaken when he hears that other people and their gods were defeated. Because he's like, obviously, dude, they will get defeated because they're not real. So when the threat comes to him, he's got the right mindset to know what is right and what is wrong. He knows that the threat is right. He's got a valid threat. But he also knows that he doesn't have to fear them overcoming their God, because that's not valid. That's not going to happen. He's got the right mind, a sound mind to understand. Hezekiah's actions showed that he hoped to see God move in response. He came to complain to God because he hoped that God would move against his enemies. Not that he would keep the place, but that God would move against his enemies. His motivation showed that he believed God will execute his justice. And his belief showed that he trusted God. Now, it's easy for us to talk about this in retrospect, right? Because they lived 3,000 years ago. And we can sit and be like, oh yeah, Ahaz did this, Hezekiah did this. And be like, oh, this is good, this is bad. But I want you to just step in their shoes for a minute. Both of them come from the line of David, the royal bloodline. They were given a promise explicitly. That promise was read out as frequently as possible. You know, Solomon's throne had lions on every side to remind them about the Lion of Judah. They lived believing the promise that their throne, the throne that God had given to them, will be established. And right before their eyes, it was all slipping away. So, in 2 Samuel 7, 8 to 10, we read the promise that God gave to David. He tells David that I took you from tending flock and placed you on a throne, appointed you over my people. I have been with you. I will make your name great. He says the people who oppressed will no longer oppress my people. And then he says, I will raise up an offspring to succeed you. And then in 15 and 16, this is the promise that God gives David. But my love will never be taken away from him. This is the offspring. As I took it away from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. So when the children, as children, Ahaz and later Hezekiah, when they were growing and when they heard this promise, what would have been something that happened in their heart? They would have created some statements of trust, right? Foundations of trust. And these could sound a little bit like this. I can trust that God is with me. Because it says in the promise, it says, I have been with you. So one statement of trust they can have is, I can trust that God is with me. Another thing they must have believed is, I will thrive or be established where God has planted me, because that's what this promise says, right? Another thing is, with God's help, I can defeat my enemies. That was a statement of trust, a core belief for the bloodline of Judah. And then I will get what God has promised me. These are all conclusions, or, what you can derive from the promise that was given to David. And I want to ask you, do you think any of these statements were false? No, God gave them, right? So they must be true. But when the attack on Jerusalem happened, the crazy thing was, all of these statements of trust became questions of test. Because now, the question was, can I trust God is with me? That was the question that rose in their mind. Can I trust that God is with me? Will I thrive where God has planted me? Can I defeat my enemies? Even with God's help, can I do it? Will I get what God has promised me? See, all those statements of trust that form the core now faced shaky ground, because they became questions. And so I want to ask you, every person in this room has received a promise from God, and I believe that. On that promise you've received, you have created statements of trust, statements that form your core belief. But then when a test happens, all those statements of trust become questions of test. Then, what are your actions? What are your motivations? And what are your beliefs? A lot of people, most of the conversations with, if anyone ever asks me for advice, which surprisingly does happen. They do, and I'm just like, why would you? But anyway, they're just like, what is the right thing to do? Can you tell me if this is the right way to go? And they're like, but what if tomorrow I regret this? What if tomorrow I don't know if I made the right choice? And this trust is the core of our decision-making ability. And this is one statement I would want you to take away. So write down in your notes or take a picture. But we know we've made the right choice when we trust the one who decides what is right. Give you an example. When your friend says, I know the right person for you. You will only know, you won't regret the choice, because why? You trust what they mean by right. Right? When your parents say, this is the right choice for you, this is the right career for you, a child is able to live with that knowledge and not regret it when they trust the parents' definition of right. So if you're sitting here thinking, man, that's okay, but how do I choose between the right and wrong today? My question to you is going to be, who is deciding what is right for you? Because are you deciding? Then my answer is going to be no. Who is deciding what is right for you? If God is the one, then all those promises are yes. But if it's you deciding that this is my right fit, I'm sorry. When our statements of trust become questions of test, we face an enemy that may be bigger than the king of Assyria, that has been around since the first man and woman walked the Garden of Eden. You know the name of this enemy? It's doubt. It's the opposite of trust, where you don't trust, but you doubt. You doubt the intention of the person who decided what is right and wrong. And there's this beautiful letter that John Wesley wrote to someone many years ago. He says, "My dear sister, away with those doubts. They did not come from him that calls you. Oh, let nothing induce you to cast away that confidence which has great recompense of reward. Beware, my dear friend, of the reasoning devil, whose way is to first tempt." What did that reasoning devil look like in Ahaz's life? It looked like that military strategy. It looked like a smart thing to do, because he would have that pincer motion, and the Romans would do that. The Greeks would do that in that time, and later, much later. But then you would think that this is a military strategy that's quite famous and quite well known. Logically, it's good. It's a good reason. And he says, beware of the reasoning devil, who first tempts and then accuses. Says this is the right thing to do, and then says, is this the right thing to do? There is a right temper, a sorrow for our little improvements, which exceedingly resembles envy. But the anointing of the Holy One will teach you to distinguish one from the other. You are saved of the Lord. Distrust him not, much less deny what he has done for you and in you. If you did, how could you be thankful for it? Look unto Jesus and stand fast. I am, my dear Peggy, your affectionate brother, John Wesley. This letter was written on February 8th, 1766. He's talking about the one who decides what is right. If there was a court of judgment, and both Ahaz and Hezekiah stood, what would the judge, who would the judge deem as guilty? Ahaz? All the things that he did, all the sacrifices he made, all the doubt and disbelief that he had. In the Old Testament, we see a glimpse of God's love. We see it for Hezekiah, we see his power in Hezekiah's life, but we see it in the life of Ahaz. Turn with me to Isaiah 7. In verses 4 to 7, God is telling Isaiah to give a message to Ahaz. He's telling Isaiah, tell Ahaz not to worry. Tell him not to fear. This is the same God who's been treated as third-rate God by Ahaz. But this God is coming and saying, tell Ahaz that do not fear. He says, in verse 7, he says, but the sovereign Lord says, this invasion will not happen. It will never take place. God assures Ahaz that despite all that you did before, I will not let this happen. He gives him an assurance. And then in 10 to 17, we see, later the Lord sent his message to King Ahaz. Ask the Lord your God for a sign of confirmation, Ahaz. Make it as difficult as you want. Because God knew that there is doubt in Ahaz's heart. Right? He knew that at his core, the belief was that God is not sovereign. So he's like, I'll give you a chance. Ask me for a sign, I'll give it to you. And then God says, make it as difficult as you want. As high as heaven or as deep as the place of the dead. God is giving Ahaz a chance. But what does the king do? He says, no, I will not test the Lord like that. Sometimes we like to do that. We like to make ourselves sound very righteous. I don't want to test the Lord the way. And I don't want to say it like that because sometimes it's the right situation. But here, when God Himself is asking, test me, He's like, no, I won't do it. You know why? Because the motivation and belief is threatened here. In case God's sign actually happens, then He's going to have to let go of all those things. All those big, expensive things that He created, all those temples, all that. Then suddenly He would have to face the guilt of being wrong if God actually gives a sign. So He says, no, don't give me a sign, don't give me a sign. I'll just wallow in my doubt. Okay? I'll just stay doubtful. Just don't give me a sign. Then Isaiah says, listen well, you royal family of David. Isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well? All right then, the Lord Himself will give you the sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. God is with us. When is He saying this? He's saying this when the kingdom of Judah is terrible. When they have despised, He's saying, I will be with you. Then He goes on to say, by the time this child is old enough to choose what is right and reject what is wrong, he will be eating yogurt and honey. Yogurt and honey are important. Why? Because both of them don't come from produce of the ground. They are animal, cattle. All right? But what He's trying to say here, and He explains that later in the book, He's saying that there will be no fruit because the land will become deserted. But there will still be providence for you. And He says, for before the child is that old, the lands of the two kings, Pekah and Rezin, that you fear so much, will both be deserted. Then the Lord will bring things on you, your nation, your family, unlike anything since Israel broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria upon you. But I want you to think of this prophecy, because this prophecy has two layers, has multiple layers actually. I won't go into that, but one was the immediate prophecy for Ahaz. That yes, a child will be born in that, and before he reaches a place of maturity, where he's able to discern between right and wrong, the kingdoms of those two oppressors will be emptied. But this is a prophecy that goes beyond time. Because you see, before you and I can discern between good and evil, the lamp of God has emptied the power of our oppressor. He's emptied the grave. He's emptied the kingdom that oppresses us. That is the love of the Father. He gave this promise not in the time of Hezekiah, but He gave this promise in the time of the most vile king of Judah. Because when we see ourselves in that place of doubt, all those statements becoming questions, that's when God comes and says, hey, trust in me. Trust in the Lord your God and lean not on your own understanding. In Romans 5:18 and 19, we read, Adam's one sin brings condemnation for everyone, but Christ's one act of righteousness brings a right relationship with God and new life for everyone. So you see, if you look at the questions in testing time again, can I trust that God is with me? See, without Christ, every response is going to be false. Because no, God is not with you when you are in the place of doubt. because you can't stand in the presence of God. But when Jesus, the Son of God, he steps in, then all the responses to each of those questions becomes true. Because of Jesus, we can boldly say that yes, I can trust that God is with me. Because of Jesus, I can boldly say that yes, I will be established in the land that God is planting me. Because of Jesus, I can defeat my enemies with God. It's not because of me, it's because of Jesus. Because of Jesus, I will get what I have been promised by God. And so I just want to encourage you. If you see trial and testing come in your life, it's the season of leveling up. It's you being in a place to train that skill of discerning what is right and what is good. And guys, you know what's the beauty of it? This is an open book test. And you have the book. Just read the book, man. It's an open book test. The answers are there. All answers are there. The test doesn't have to be as scary as you think it is, because the answers have already been given by God. And so what are some of the things that we have learned today? I'm just going to wrap up. No, this has been a bit of a long session, but we learned that maturity in discipleship requires us to differentiate between good and evil, between right and wrong. We believe in the sovereignty of God. We believe God is right. And all he does is right. And we also believe that he assigns righteousness, the status of righteousness, to each of us, like he did for Ahaz and Hezekiah. Based on what? Based on our actions, our motivations, and our beliefs. He assigns whether this is right or wrong. And so though we may do a lot of right things, we may still not be in a right standing with God. No human can meet the requirements of right standing only by their actions. But Christ satisfies the payment of righteousness. He measures up just right. And so to stand before God in righteousness, all we have to do is measure up to Christ. You have a friend who got the perfect score. All you got to do is copy his sheet. That's all. He's done it perfect. He's got 100 on 100. And he calls you and I, he says, follow me.
Thank you for tuning in for that message. We really hope that that has blessed your heart immensely. At Zealous, it's our desire that Jesus would meet you at the point of your need, and that you would truly grow in the love, in the grace that he has to offer each one of us. And that's why, if you have been enjoying the content that has been coming to you, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel, to share this content with your friends and your loved ones, and maybe even consider partnering with us as we take the message of the gospel beyond the four walls of Zealous. Once again, it means so much for us when you join in. So thank you for being here with us. God bless you, and may you have a great week ahead.